Hi, my name is Clay Charlotte, and I am a PhD candidate at Bowling Green State University in Ohio in the field of rhetoric and writing studies. And that is a field that's mostly about writing education. I've been in higher education for the past 10 years, and prior to that have a degree in English literature and a master's in education.
Hi, Dr. Clay. Thank you for coming. And let's start with the first question. The first question said, what is the purpose of education?
The purpose of education, in my opinion, is to pass along knowledge gained over years from one generation to the next generation. And the important thing when we talk about passing on information is how do we do that in a way that is effective and efficient and plays to the strengths of the students and the way that they already think. Something to keep in mind when we talk about education is that people are natural learners. We go through life always learning, no matter what, whether formally or informally. So educators should keep in mind that their students are always learning, whether they're learning what we want them to learn or not. But playing to that strength that we are natural learners is one of the most important things we should be keeping in mind when we're educating the next generation.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. So let's move on, Dr. Clay. So we are living in the information age where almost everything we want to know is available at our fingertip. So what opportunities and challenges does that present for educators?
The information age presents a lot of opportunities, but also many challenges. First and foremost, as an opportunity, is the fact that educators can assign research projects to students that couldn't have been done before in the past. In the past, research involved going to the library, maybe having to go to multiple libraries, checking out books, and then finding out after a week or two spent reading a book that it doesn't quite fit the research topic, and then they have to go back to the drawing board. So these days, research can be done very quickly online for many students at different ages, and the only difference is, how challenging or what resources the student uses for research. So like even elementary students do some research on a very small scale. And that is a great opportunity just to be able to have those access to those resources. Now, a major challenge in the information age is not access to information. That is, as I just mentioned, pretty much almost universal at this point. The challenge at this point is how do you filter and process and analyze so much information? There's a lot of credible information and a lot of not credible information out there. There's reliable and there's not reliable. So how do we know what is real and what is fake? What is reliable, what is not reliable? A big catchphrase these days is fake news. Well, what is that and how do we know? So the biggest challenge for educators is to help our students develop critical thinking skills that allow them to be able to access the information first, but then filter in and out and process in using a method that's reliable to determine, which sources can be trusted and which cannot.
Okay, that leads us to the third question. And as you know, in this era, we live in a COVID era. So in what ways is COVID impacting education?
The number one impact of COVID is obviously moving a lot of classes online or to hybrid format. And that's probably the most obvious way that most parents and students have experienced the impact. But also there's many other impacts of COVID right now in terms of how we distribute resources, how we share materials with students, how we have some of the extracurricular experiences, how do we do field trips, how do we do a lot of these other things that are usually done on site, whether in a classroom or in a park or at some location where a field trip, like a destination like a zoo or a research laboratory. How do you do a lot of these physical hands-on like field work or site-based work in an online format? So or in a COVID format where even if you're doing it in person, you have to do it in socially distanced ways, so that your students are broken up into different groups and spread apart. A lot of schools that are doing hybrid format have broken up students into cohorts, and so you might have a class of 80 people, but they're divided into 6 or 8 different groups of 10 or something, so that they can fit in a room together or into a lab together. And managing all those different cohorts is a challenge. In a lecture hall, you can deliver the same lecture to 100 people at once, but you divide those into cohorts and you're repeating yourself potentially again and again. So COVID has presented us with a lot of challenges in how we essentially deliver information, share resources, share materials with students, and kind of create those learning experiences.
Okay, so thank you. That will take us to the last questions, since we are talking about the online. So what advice would you give to the student and parents of a student who are struggling with online learning during COVID?
As I mentioned earlier, as people are just learning machines. We are naturally born learners. And whether intentionally or unintentionally, we're going to be learning at all times. So I guess my suggestion to parents and students is to find ways to make sure that all the moments of our day have some connection to learning. Meaning that, like, if you're cooking, maybe that's a time to talk about what they're learning that day. If you're walking around your neighborhood, maybe you are reviewing something that you learned in class. Things like that, just to make learning a more obvious and kind of purposeful part of our lives. Because we're going to be learning no matter what. We just need to make sure we're doing it in intentional ways with like a focus on what we need to learn. Another thing to keep in mind is, as I mentioned, the experiences, the physical, hands-on, and like site-based experiences of education are really not there right now. Most of education is either being in a small group in a classroom or staring at a screen. And that loses a lot of the kind of interpersonal but also physical kind of aspect of learning. A lot of our memories and the way we store and recall information is tied to where we are and what we're looking at. And so you might find, like, when you walk into a room, you suddenly forget why you're in that room. And a big reason for that is something called the threshold effect. When you cross that threshold to a new room, your brain kind of wipes clean. And so we know, like, through science, that a lot of our memories and ways of storing information are tied to physical locations. And when you're staring at a screen all day long, you're losing that dimension of education. So what I encourage students and parents of students to do is to move around and to change locations, even if it means moving the computer from one room to another every once in a while, or even if it means leaving the computer for a little while to do some review activity, but changing the scenery, doing it in a park or doing it on the porch or doing it in different locations. So yeah, I think the number one thing we need to do is to realize that outside of school, outside of the classroom, like the physical classroom, when we're doing online education, we need to try to replicate and kind of mimic that experience of the classroom by creating those kind of physical learning experiences to counteract staring at a screen all day long.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Clay. That was really very, very beneficial and important information. I would like to thank you, and thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you.